It was a quiet morning in the small, forgotten town of Hollow Creek, where most people lived their entire lives without ever seeing the world beyond their fields. But on this day, the local auction was about to change everything. A simple farmer, barely scraping by, stood among a crowd of wealthy landowners and high-rolling investors, none of them suspecting that a single decision could turn their lives upside down. There, in the corner of the barn, stood an unremarkable horse, a creature seemingly no different from the dozens of others around it. Yet, as the bidding started, the farmer did something no one saw coming. He placed an offer that shocked the room. The millionaires chuckled at first, convinced the poor man had no idea what he was doing. They were used to getting their way, to always having the upper hand, but something in the farmer's eyes told a different story. He wasn't just bidding for a horse. No, he was bidding for a future none of them were prepared for. And as the auctioneer's hammer came down, sealing the deal, they had no idea that the horse was more than just a prize. It was a key to something much greater. The moment the farmer took possession of the horse, he sensed something different. The air around him buzzed with energy, as if the creature itself held a secret, a power hidden deep within. It was subtle at first, just a flicker of strength, but the deeper the farmer looked, the more he realized that the horse was not ordinary. This wasn't a simple farm animal. It was something far more extraordinary. As he took the horse back to his small, rundown farm, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had made the most important decision of his life. The millionaires might have laughed, but they were about to learn that sometimes the simplest things can be the most powerful. With every passing day, the horse's abilities grew stronger, more impossible, until even the farmer could no longer deny the truth. But was this power a gift, or was it a curse? And would he be able to keep it hidden long enough to protect himself from those who would stop at nothing to get it for themselves? But just as the farmer began to realize the true extent of the horse's abilities, a shadow loomed on the horizon. The millionaires, never content to let go of what they believed was rightfully theirs, began to take notice. They weren't just after a prize, they were after the power that lay within that horse. But what they didn't know was that the horse's power had a cost that might just be too great to bear. And as the farmer stood at the edge of his field, the horse at his side, he couldn't help but wonder, had he just brought home his salvation, or had he unleashed a force far beyond his control? The farmer, whose name had long been forgotten by most, was a man of few words. He kept to himself, working tirelessly in the fields as his hands weathered from years of toil. His life had always been a struggle, scraping by from harvest to harvest, barely able to pay the bills, let alone dream of a better future. Hollow Creek had never offered him anything but hardship. The small farm he owned was all he had left, passed down through generations of farmers, each of them eking out a life from the unforgiving soil. It was a quiet existence, one marked by simple routines and a deep, enduring connection to the land. But now, everything was different. The horse had changed something in him. There was a stirring, a fire he hadn't felt in years. His days of scraping by felt like a distant memory as he watched the animal in the barn, its eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. There was no denying the power within it, no ignoring the way it seemed to sense his every thought, his every emotion. It felt as though the horse was not just a companion, but a partner and ally who had come into his life at the perfect moment. The millionaires who had laughed at him were beginning to wonder if they had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated him, and now, as rumors began to swirl about the horse's unusual abilities, the whispers grew louder. The wealthy landowners who dominated the region had always seen themselves as untouchable. They controlled everything: land, resources, power. They didn't believe in chance. They believed in strategy, in control. And yet, here was this one farmer, a nobody in their eyes, who had somehow secured something they couldn't even begin to understand. What if the horse was more than just a curiosity? What if it was the key to something bigger, something that could threaten their dominance? Among these landowners was a man named Everett Finch, a business tycoon whose wealth extended far beyond the county. He was the kind of man who could buy anything he wanted except the one thing that mattered. Finch had heard the rumors about the horse and dismissed them at first. But as the stories grew stranger, so did his obsession with the creature. He couldn't stand the idea of something, or someone, out of his reach. Everett's eyes were always sharp, calculating. He knew how to manipulate situations to his advantage, how to make people do what he wanted. But this was different. The horse wasn't a simple commodity. It had power, raw and untamed. Finch could sense it, and it terrified him. He began to see the farmer not as an insignificant peasant, but as a key player in a much larger game. If he could get control of the horse, the farmer's strange luck, and the abilities of the creature, he would have the upper hand. There would be no one who could challenge him, no one who could take what he had built. But there was something Finch didn't account for, the farmer's own growing connection to the horse. Every day, as the creature grew more powerful, so did the farmer. He wasn't just a passive bystander anymore. He was starting to learn its ways, starting to understand its language in a way that no one else could. What the landowners didn't realize was that they were playing a game they didn't understand, and the stakes were much higher than they could have imagined. The farmer wasn't just protecting the horse, he was protecting himself. And as he grew stronger, so did his resolve to keep the secrets of the horse hidden. Yet, the growing mystery around the horse wasn't the only force that threatened to unravel everything. There were darker, more dangerous elements at play, elements that had been hidden from the farmer. As he spent more time with the horse, he began to experience strange visions, flashes of places he had never been, of things he could never have imagined. The more he tried to ignore them, the stronger they became until they could no longer be pushed aside. The horse wasn't just a simple creature, it was part of something much older, something far beyond the world the farmer knew. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, the farmer stood in his barn, gazing out at the horse. The animal's silhouette stood tall against the glowing sky, its eyes still gleaming with that mysterious light. It seemed to be waiting, watching him, as if it knew something he didn't. Something important. Something that could change everything. In the distance, the sound of carriages approached, the rumble of wheels breaking the silence. The farmer's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the figures in the distance. Finch. The landowners. They were coming for him, and they weren't coming with peaceful intentions. They were coming to take what they believed was theirs. They had underestimated the farmer before, but they were about to learn that he was not the same man they had once dismissed. And so, as the horse snorted, a low, almost otherworldly sound, the farmer knew that the time for hiding was over. He could feel the power surging within him, the same power that radiated from the horse. The game had changed, and he had no choice but to play. What neither he nor the landowners knew was that this was just the beginning. What lay ahead was a mystery much deeper than any of them could have anticipated. And as the carriages drew near, the farmer wondered if he had truly made the right choice in bringing the horse into his life. Would he be able to protect it? Or had he unknowingly unleashed something far more dangerous than even he could control? As the carriages drew closer, the farmer's pulse quickened, his mind racing. The sounds of the approaching wheels became sharper, clearer, as if the world itself had slowed down to a crawl. He had no illusions about the intentions of those coming toward him. They weren't here for a friendly conversation or a handshake, they were coming for the horse, and with it, the power that he had just begun to understand. His heart pounded in his chest as he turned to the horse, standing silently beside him. He reached out, his fingers brushing against its sleek coat. In that brief touch, he felt an electric pulse, a surge of energy that sent a shiver down his spine. It was almost as though the horse was reacting to the tension, aware of the danger closing in. But something else stirred deep within him. The farmer had always lived with a quiet fear, but now he wasn't just afraid for his farm or his future. He was afraid for the horse and for the power it represented. What if, in his desperation, he had opened a door that could never be closed again? What if the power inside that horse wasn't meant for someone like him? The whispers he'd been hearing in his dreams, the visions that had started haunting him, they had grown darker, more intense. The horse was more than just a mystical creature. It was a link to something ancient, something that had been dormant for centuries, perhaps longer. The carriages arrived, halting at the entrance to the farm. Figures in dark coats stepped out, their faces obscured by shadows. Finch was at the front, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. He wasn't here to negotiate, the farmer could tell that much. He was here to claim what he believed was rightfully his. The landowners behind him moved with quiet purpose, their gazes falling on the horse as though it were the last piece of a puzzle they had been trying to complete for years. "Give it to me," Finch said, his voice low and dangerous. His tone was more command than request, and it sent a cold chill through the farmer. The farmer stood tall, his grip tightening around the reins of the horse. It wasn't just an animal anymore. It was a symbol of everything he had fought for, of the life he had built despite the odds. "You don't understand," he said, his voice steady but tinged with fear. "This isn't yours to take. It was never meant for you." Finch's lip curled into a smirk, a look of disdain crossing his face. "You're naive, farmer. You think this creature chose you? It doesn't care about you. It's power, and power always seeks its rightful owner." The farmer's heart raced. His mind flashed back to the strange visions, the fleeting moments when he could almost hear the horse's thoughts, feel its intentions. Was Finch right? Was the horse only using him as a vessel for something much larger, something beyond his control? His grip on the reins tightened, his knuckles white. He knew one thing for sure: he wasn't about to let anyone take the horse from him. Not without a fight. Without warning, the horse reared up, its hooves striking the air with a power that sent the landowner stumbling back. Finch's eyes widened in surprise. The horse was more than just an animal. It was an extension of something greater, a force that none of them could comprehend. The ground beneath them trembled slightly, as if responding to the creature's power. For a moment, there was silence. The tension hung thick in the air, and the farmer could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Finch took a step forward, his hand reaching out as if to claim the horse. But just as he did, the air around them seemed to crackle, and the farmer felt a sudden, overwhelming surge of energy. It was as if the horse was not just alive, but alive with purpose, with an ancient power that had been waiting for this very moment. A deep, resonant voice echoed in the farmer's mind. It wasn't his own voice. It wasn't the horse's voice. It was something else, something older, wiser. "You are not ready. But you will be." The words sent a shudder through him. He wasn't ready. He didn't know what the horse wanted from him, but he knew that whatever this power was, it wasn't meant for just anyone. The visions he had been seeing, the strange dreams, they weren't just figments of his imagination. They were warnings, messages from something far beyond the mortal realm. Something that had been waiting, buried in the earth, waiting for the right person to unlock it. And now, that person was him. But how could he control something so vast, so ancient? Before he could react, Finch's hand reached out and touched the horse's side. The instant his fingers made contact, a blinding flash of light erupted from the animal, enveloping the entire farm in a wave of heat and energy. The farmer staggered back, shielding his eyes from the overwhelming brilliance. When the light faded, Finch was on the ground, his body limp, his eyes wide with shock. The farmer's heart skipped a beat. What had just happened? Had the horse? No, it couldn't be. He didn't understand what was going on, but the fear in Finch's eyes told him that whatever had happened, it was not something he could easily reverse. For a brief moment, it felt as though the world had stopped. Finch's men were frozen in place, staring at their fallen leader, unsure of what to do next. The farmer stood, still trying to comprehend what had just transpired. His hand trembled as he reached for the horse, but the animal didn't move, at least not in the way he expected. The horse looked at him, its eyes filled with an intelligence that felt beyond his reach. It wasn't just waiting for orders anymore. It was waiting for something more, something that would push them both into a future they were both unprepared for. The farmer swallowed hard. What had he unleashed? And could he survive it? The farmer stood frozen, his heart racing as he stared down at Finch, who lay motionless on the ground. The once confident tycoon who had come to claim what he believed was his, now seemed like a helpless shell of the man he had been just moments ago. His fingers twitched slightly, but that was all. He wasn't dead, but he was far from the person who had arrived at the farm with such arrogance. The silence that followed was deafening, and the farmer could feel the weight of the moment crushing him. The power he had so desperately tried to harness had just shattered everything he knew. He glanced nervously at the horse, which stood silently by his side, as if waiting for him to make the next move. It wasn't just the horse anymore. It was the entire force behind it, something far greater than the simple life he had imagined. He knew now that this creature wasn't just a gift, it was a test. A test of power, of will, of understanding. And he had just failed the first one. As Finch's men moved cautiously toward their fallen leader, the farmer stepped back, his gaze shifting between them and the horse. He could hear the murmurs of uncertainty growing louder among the landowners. They weren't sure what had just happened, but they were afraid. Fear had replaced the confidence they had arrived with, and for the first time, the farmer felt an unfamiliar sense of control. He had done this, he had triggered the horse's power, unleashed something far beyond anything they had ever encountered. But the question still lingered in his mind, what now? What was he supposed to do with this power? The horse turned to him, its eyes meeting his once again. In that moment, something clicked. It wasn't the horse that needed him, it was him who needed the horse. The connection between them, the one that had seemed so foreign and terrifying before, had now become clear. The farmer wasn't just the keeper of this creature. He was the one chosen to guide it, to unlock its true potential. The strange visions, the messages, the sudden bursts of power, it all made sense now. This was more than a creature from another world. It was a force of nature, a being tied to the earth itself. It had been waiting for him, and only him, to unleash its power in the right way. The farmer took a deep breath and reached out, his hand trembling slightly. The horse didn't move away this time. It leaned into him, as if it understood the shift that had taken place between them. With a quiet whisper, he said the words that had been echoing in his mind for days. "I'm ready." The instant the words left his lips, the earth beneath them seemed to hum with energy. A powerful surge of light erupted from the horse, blasting outward in every direction. The farmer closed his eyes against the brilliance, but he could feel the change, the raw power coursing through him. It wasn't just the horse anymore, it was him too. He could feel every inch of the land, every breath of wind, every pulse of life that had once seemed so distant. He was no longer just a man, he had become one with the very force that had brought him to this moment. The ground shifted as the horse let out a deep, resonating sound that vibrated through the air. The landowners took a collective step back, fear etched on their faces as they watched in awe. It was clear now that the horse was no longer an object of possession, it was an extension of something much greater, a being tied to the very essence of life itself. Finch, still lying on the ground, slowly began to stir. His eyes opened, but they weren't the same. There was no arrogance in them now, only confusion and fear. He struggled to sit up, his hands shaking as he reached for his head. The power that had knocked him out was still pulsing in the air, and the weight of it pressed down on him, reminding him that he had come to the farm to take something that had not been meant for him. But the farmer didn't focus on Finch or his men. His mind was elsewhere now, connected to something far more important. The horse, still by his side, was no longer just an ally, it was part of him. And together, they had the power to reshape the world around them. The land that had been struggling beneath his feet now felt alive, vibrant, as though it were waking from a long slumber. As the landowners retreated, fear overcoming their greed, the farmer looked out over the fields. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be connected to the land, to the power beneath it, and to the future that stretched out before him. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing for certain: he would never be the same again. The journey had only just begun, and the world would never look at him the same way again. But then, just as the farmer began to step forward, a voice deep and unmistakable whispered from behind him. "This is just the beginning. There is much more to learn." The ground trembled once more as the final words echoed in the air, leaving the farmer standing, wide-eyed, with a realization that the journey ahead would be unlike anything he could have ever imagined. And as the horse's form shimmered in the twilight, the farmer understood some powers were meant to be wielded, but only by those who were truly ready for what came next. With a final glance toward the horizon, the farmer knew that the world was about to change. And he, with the horse by his side, would lead it into a new age, one that would be shaped by the power he had only just begun to grasp.